Welcome back to the True Body Intelligence Podcast. My name is Lee Maher, and I'm your host. And today, we're going to dig into ICE-centric Strength, which means isometric, concentric, and eccentric contractions at maximal force. And the reason why we want to talk about this is because I want you to know that there's the potential for maximal change at a physical, at a mental, at an emotional, at a spiritual level that will help you manifest instantaneous permanent change for the rest of your life. Now that must seem pretty inviting. So stay tuned and forget about drinking water and going to the bathroom and getting snacks. Like, stay put so you can get down on some of this goodness.
So we're back.
We're back. Here we are.
And we're talking about ICE-centric Strength.
Yes, you said it correctly. It's pretty good.
It took me a second.
Yeah.
And this is the third thing we're learning within the True Body Intelligence system.
Yes.
So now we're getting to the meat of the matter.
Yeah,
So
actually the meat of the matter.
Okay.
You're right, because it's maximal contractions at the center point of every single muscle in your body.
So this is more on like the high performance, like athlete level kind of stuff, or?
This is at like the high performance transformational stuff, because we get to use maximal leverage and force because you have somebody who's helping you move through the process. Like, they're using all their weight and energy against you, and they're allowing you to beat their force, and then they're beating your force, right? And the reason why this is most exciting for me is because anyone who shows up at the door that's got some mountain to climb that seems too big for them, and they've ventured down 100 different avenues before they come to see you, it's always the same story. I did this, I did that, I did that, I did this, I did this, I did that, and none of it worked. And, well, how much force did they use? You know, it's a typical question for me. Like, well, you know, I laid down and they rubbed me here and they did that. I said, but how involved were you? So you just laid there, right? And this, yeah. And I'm like, so you use no force. Okay, so you've been doing this repetitive motion for 30 years, and then a person's going to get rid of all that excessive tension, stress, and distortion, and there's going to be no force involved. Yet it took you thousands of pounds of repetitive force to put it in. Does that make any sense? And then there's a pause. Oh, I never really thought about it like that. Okay, so ice-centric strength for me is like the meaty part of true transformation, because we get to maximize our effort and we get to benefit maximally from that effort, physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically. I mean, I have people who show up here exhausted, like they're dead, rusty doornails, right? And they have an opportunity to get their life force back because we open up these channels. So when you're 7 or you're 77, the thing that I discovered is that it's the same. Meaning, you got a 7-year-old boy, you got a 77-year-old woman. Guess what? They typically have the same amount of tension and stress in their bodies. Okay? So the question is, how did it get in here? Well, you're born this way. People are born knock-kneed. People are born bow-legged. People are born with a tucked chin. People are born with their head is pushed too far forward. Other people are born, their shoulders are rotated forward. Other people, their shoulders are rotated too far back. Like, people come in this way, right? And now we have a system that allows us to rewire from the ground up, right? From the feet all the way to the top of the head. The rotations of the bones. So in order to rotate a bone back into its correct position, we're going to need a massive amount of structural force and leverage to be able to do that. And guess what? We can do it. That means people who were born bow-legged no longer need to be bow-legged. People who are knock-kneed no longer to be knock-kneed. People whose heads are pushed too far forward, or their pelvis is tucked too far underneath them, or their pelvis is in a state of hyperflexion, pushed too far back, they no longer need to live like that. And as your posture goes, your energy goes. As your posture goes, your mind goes. As your posture goes, your emotions go. So if my posture affects my energy, my mind, and my emotions, well, what's the priority? I mean, the priority obviously is to change the posture. Because see, when my chest is up and my head's behind my chest, I'm leading with my heart. But when my head's in front of my heart, I'm leaning with my head. So, do I want to work with someone who's leading with their head or leading with their heart? I want to work with people who are leading with their heart. Because now we have an opportunity to have great work, but also great connection, right? Like you and Raphael were helping me here this week. We got great work and we got great connection. And so for me, I want to have a more impactful experience. And ICE-centric strength makes everything much more impactful.
So can you tell us a little bit about it? I understand that it's something you have to...
Yeah. We can get into it a little bit. So for me, I think with ICE-centric strength, the most important thing is to get the emotional body turned on, right? And once we turn on the emotional body, guess what happens? The emotional intelligence, it gets higher.
So we did some of that with the breathing in Ma Xing, right?
Yeah.
You said it activates the emotional body.
But that's different. That's emotional discharge, right? So we're discharging the excess emotional charge being held in the body. Well, with icentric strength, we're activating and increasing the positive emotional charge. See, Ma Xing, we're removing the excessive negative emotional charge that's held in all the structural tissues. With icentric strength, we're activating and strengthening the emotional charge, which is changing the inherent polarity, which now, if I increase that positive emotional charge in my system, well, guess what? My brain lights up more. I also become more intelligent. I become more emotionally present. So we have negative emotional charge and we have positive emotional charge. Ma Xing is really focused on reducing negative emotional charge initially. The difference with icentric strength is we're strengthening all those tissues, all those muscles that connect to the bones. And now we're increasing positive emotional charge. So now when my positive emotional charge is high, I'm what?
I don't know.
I'm happy.
Oh.
I'm joyful. I'm peaceful. I'm grounded. I'm passionate. And so when you have access to these feelings, imagine how easy it is to be motivated to create a great day, right? And then you start stacking these good days. And after you stack 10 good days together, you have a great day. Stack another 20 good days together, you have 2 great days in a row, right? And then exponentially to start shifting. So icentric strength allows us, because we're using maximal force, to pull out a maximal amount of structural distortion, right? So
this is something we do by ourselves, right?
No, this is something somebody does to us.
Somebody that
right?
Okay.
So that's been unclear. So when you're doing icentric strength, you have a partner, okay? In the gym, they would call them negatives, right? But the challenge is that weight is static. So it's only going to create so much change. You need somebody who can change with your force, right? So let's say at the top end of a push-up, when I start to lower, I'm lowering with very little weight, right? But when I get to the bottom end of my push-up and my elbows are pushed far out to the side, when I'm at the bottom there, I have very little force left because the tissue's already all the way open, okay? And so when you're doing icentric strength, you have someone who's moving with your actual force. So let's say at the top end, I can push with 100. And at the minimum, I can push with 50. And at the bottom, I can push with 3 pounds of force. Well, there's no gym equipment that changes its force relative to your force, right? So with ice-centric strength, you have to be able to recruit someone else to help you. Hopefully you have somebody in your life that will help you.
By the way, water does that. Would water work?
Would water work? Water would work if the container would change its capacity and shape. Then that could totally be possible. So as you pushed up, then what would happen is that water would get shoved out. And as you're going higher, right, more would come out. When you go lower, are you going to be able to draw more water into?
Yeah, I guess it's less flexible in that way. It just resists you more than you resist it, but it lacks the ability to also change it as you go and develop.
With ice-centric strength, what you're going to notice is you're going to feel better instantly. There's going to be an instantaneous change in your discomfort level. Okay? Now, once you get out of discomfort and you're getting rid of that negative, excessive emotional distortion that's sitting inside your structural tissues, you're going to start to feel a sense of freedom. And in that freedom, you're going to start to take risk. So for instance, I had a friend recently who chose as a strategy to overgive and overdo for others, and to avoid setting boundaries and avoid communicating what their needs were. We did a little bit of work in their body, opened up their hip flexors, and then I got a text, hey, very interesting. This weekend, I set some very clear boundaries with my roommates. Now, did I take the time to teach them how to set a boundary? No. Unnecessary. Because the intelligence of boundaries is in the body. And so once we stripped out a massive amount of tension, they had access to the inherent intelligence that was already in there. And so then it felt very comfortable to set a boundary. It felt normal. And then it felt abnormal to avoid setting boundaries. And so ice-centric strength gives you access to the highest functioning level intelligence that's sitting in the belly of the muscle and in the central point of the organ that's associated with the channel of energy that runs directly through the center line of that muscle. And so who would like to have instantaneous permanent change? You think people like anxiety? You think they love being anxious? You think they love being angry and frustrated and agitated and irritated and fearful and self-righteous? All of it's like heavy, icky feelings, right? It's jarring and it's disruptive because it disconnects you from others. And so here we are in this plane of existence, we hear this concept of oneness. Well, in order for me to get into the depth of oneness with everyone around me, I got to be in oneness with myself. Well, how do I get into oneness with myself? I remove the massive amount of distortion, right? And so, Ma Xing, you could say, Ma Xing is for your stress, your unresolved emotional baggage. Bestersize is to deal with your tension, right? Eccentric strength is to deal with your distortion, right? So imagine it takes a massive amount of unresolved stress to create a little bit of physical tension. Let me say that again. It takes a massive amount of unresolved stress to produce a little bit of tension. Imagine how much tension it takes to create structural distortion. And what I mean by that is your bones are sitting in the wrong positions. So,
and you're saying that some people are even born that way.
Some people are born that way. So imagine how stressed the mother was when the child was in the womb. Imagine how much how stressed the mom was before she had the child, right? Before she conceived. Imagine how stressed the dad was before he left his seed in her womb. And then you think, wow, in order to undo all that, I need something that's a big force. Because big forces create big change. Little forces, they create little change. Medium forces, they create medium change. So what do I need? I need ICE-centric strength to create instantaneous and immediate change with these forces that I'm fighting against at an emotional level, at a subconscious level, at a superconscious level. I need something big. I need a hammer. I need something that's going to eradicate this immediately once I become aware of it, right? So,
is this the order by which you usually regiment these things? So first you go to the ancestral stuff, then you go into the exercise that you do with people, the Bestercise,
yeah.
and then we go into the mushing, and then we do the
eccentric strength. It depends, right? It depends on the person.
So
right?
sometimes it's in a different order.
Sometimes it's in a different order relative to where they're open, right? So let's say someone needs eccentric strength, and they come in and they can't sit down. Well, am I going to sit there and force them to sit down, or are we going to solve this structural issue to get them to help them dissolve this excessive stiffness in their low back or the excessive stiffness in their knee? Well, I'm going to solve that first, right? And so I'm going to do eccentric strength, knowing that I'm eventually going to get to the moshing to deal with the structural health, but I got to be able to get them to sit there with me so I can do my deep investigation. And so another person comes in, let's say it's their son, and his sitting down is comfortable for him. Well, I'm probably going to start where he's open. And maybe he's more open initially to the investigation. So I have a strategy, but that strategy changes relative to the person that I'm working with. And so at some point, they need all of it, right? Because earlier we talked about tension and stress sits in different layers of the body, and each system we're talking about addresses another layer. And so it's my job through the investigation to figure out and listen to the science and the information that they're giving me and be able to interpret that in such a way as I'm able to figure out what's the implicate order that they need, and then investigate that, put it into play, and see where it takes us, right? Because I'm constantly asking questions. Okay, what do you notice here? What do you notice there? What does that bring up for you, right? And then the information that they're giving me, that's telling me where to go next. It's different than you come in and go, hey, I got one size fits all.
Yeah, you're basically
What do you
paying
want?
attention
You want?
to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you said that, for example, the mushing and the eccentric practice, these you obviously do with another person, so you teach it mostly to the individual who's going to be receiving it, or you teach it to both people, or you teach them how to teach others as well?
No, what happens when they come to see me for eccentric strength, I'm doing the work on them, right? Now, if they came to a training, or they were a couple that came here, or they were parent-child, or they were best friends, and they wanted to go through the process together, then I'm going to teach them, right? So I'm going to teach them how to receive, but also how to give, right? So there's this very symbiotic exchange going on, because I want people to give, to learn to give as much as they receive, and learn to receive as much as they give.
And from all the different kinds of relationships that might come see you, if it's parent-child, I would assume that there's something a little bit different, or maybe not, and correct me if I'm wrong, about couples, like romantic couples. Do you approach this differently? Because they have to take, again, my intuition tells me that there's like an extra element there, but maybe that I'm just reading too much into it.
It depends on the couple, right? Some couples, they're coming in the door and there's rage, right? Or there's a lack of feeling of safety. So I got to get that out of the field first before I even let them touch each other.
But yeah, exactly. But because sex is involved, does that change anything in the way that you teach them? Because
Could that relate? But that's a different subject.
yeah,
Right?
of course.
That's a whole chapter, right?
All right.
In a completely different book. So for the listeners, I'm sure you'd love for me to dive into that. And this is the importance of you continuing to check in to the True Body Intelligence podcast, because I will eventually get into that topic. But to answer the other question you asked, anytime someone's being recruited to work on another person's body, you need to get whatever disruption they have between each other out of the field first. Because otherwise that's going to show up when they start working on each other. And what will they do? They'll hurt each other at a subconscious level. So I got to get all that stuff out of the field. And what that brings up for me is the next conversation that we got to get into, which is the body of light, right? Because body of light is the rare system where you can learn to use it to work to help someone else, and you can use it to help yourself, right? And so it bridges the gap. And it allows me to be able to transmute the resistance that's going on between two people that are occupying the same field. So that could be a mother-daughter relationship, that could be a father-daughter relationship, that could be, I've had, business partners in here before, and I've had to transmute the field of negative energy existing between them. And so I think it's very important for the other person to feel supremely safe with this other person before you start teaching them how to use maximal force to work on this person's body. Because that excessive negative emotional charge will invite in a self-defeating moment. And then I will have taught you how to hurt someone else. And then that karma is coming back to me, right? And so, do I want to participate in that? No. So what I do is I filter everything through to make sure we get to a position of neutrality in that relationship before I ever allow them to begin to even think about working on each other.
And the body of light relates to the next step after you do that?
1000%. So many times the body of light is the first thing. But for the listener, I'm going to let them process ICE-centric Strength, integrate. If you're an emotionally defined being, then you need to take at least 3, 4, 5 days before you dig into the next part of what we're doing, because emotionals are retroactive by nature, which means they need a significant amount of time to process information. And if in your human design, and you need to look that up, if you are a 2 line, which means you're a 2-4, a 2-5, a 6-2, or a 5-2, you need time to hermit, which means you need time to process your feelings, ideas, your experiences, your desires, your wants in your own space, away from other people. And so I always want to protect them, meaning give them the best chance of success of integrating everything that we're sharing at a very deep level. So the body of light is the big step. Like, it's the step of all of the systems within True Body Intelligence. I feel this is the most important because we're talking about a concept that is ancient but also new to the world today, which is transmutation. And to get into transmutation, you got to have like a really clear mind. So these people need time to transition out of talking about the body, because now we're going to be talking about energy and consciousness and karma and the past. And that's a very deep subject. And they're going to need to have the mental and the emotional bandwidth and the energetic bandwidth to process this. So I think we're going to shift gears, and we're going to give you the space and the time to effectively sink into what you've learned so far about a lot of what we taught. Because in this last episode, we started talking about Bestersize and Mashing included with ICE-centric Strength. So make sure when you're tuning in to watch the previous episodes so that this episode makes a lot more sense. And you're going to need this one. Watch it a few times because it integrates the other 3 episodes that we're talking about in terms of the systems within true body intelligence and the importance and the impact and how we go about doing things the way that we do them to provide the most profound change that you could possibly ever get if you're into true transformation like I am. Thank you for tuning in to today's content. This will be made available in its full form of everything we put together for you at truebodyintelligence.com. And at truebodyintelligence.com, you can tune into my book, Free for Life, a U.S. Navy SEAL's unique journey to inner freedom and outer peace. And there I will teach you at a much deeper level. And this will be really, really, really good reference tool for you. Plus, the audiobook has an opportunity to allow you to start the program already by purchasing the one with the energetic integrations, and that will help you get started. All of this content will also be available on all major platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, and YouTube.